Welcome to Stock Time to Improv. I'm Mary Scott with Business Ref, and I want startups to be wildly successful. Today, we're going to be talking to Gordon Firemark, who's the podcast lawyer, about things that'll cost you if you don't hire a lawyer. So thanks for coming, Gordon.
Well, thanks for having me, Mary. It's great to be with you.
So, what's one of the first things that's going to really cost a startup if they don't use a lawyer?
The first thing that, you know, the big mistake is just leaving the business and legal structure either till it's too late or just not doing it at all. The default thing about, so legal structures, we're talking about corporations or limited liability companies or sometimes partnerships and joint ventures and other kinds of things. But basically, the default is if you don't start a business entity like a corporation or an LLC, you are treated as a sole proprietor, or if there's more than one person, it's a partnership. And partners means unlimited liability. That liability is shared. So if you and I are partners and you do something that costs us a bunch, it's costing us both a bunch, maybe even just me if I'm the deep pocket in the pair. So there's no protection without the entity, and that's important. The cleanup later gets really expensive and time consuming and troublesome. The other thing is sometimes you have relationships that need some kind of a structure just to sort of act like a prenup. What happens if the things go wrong and someone needs to leave or gets sick or disabled or dies or whatever? You don't necessarily want to be in business with that person's former spouse, those kinds of things. So having those kinds of structures in place, even if it says something as simple as a collaboration agreement, can really keep you out of some hot water and troublesome legal wrangling labor and
Having
story.
somebody as a work for hire, that makes a big difference, particularly if you're talking about intellectual property.
Absolutely, absolutely. So a quick story here is about a collaboration that really shouldn't have been a collaboration. It was this casual working relationship that was treated, because collaborations are essentially partnerships, two or more people coming together to do some form of business. So from the very start, this should have been something entirely different. It should have been a contractor being engaged or hired to provide services. And it's okay to pay them with a revenue share, unless it's, sort of personal services that looks like wages should be paid, and then you run afoul of minimum wage rules and things. But basically, they could have just said, you'll do this for us and we will give you a percentage of our profits. And it would have been fine. But no, they had to call it a collaboration. And that set up this whole house of cards where the collaborator eventually tried to take over and take control. And they wanted to get their hands on the money that the business was generating. And it led to a bunch of problems. So just by calling it something like that, and honestly, and using an AI to draft a contract instead of having a lawyer do it, they bought themselves just a truckload's worth of headaches and legal wrangling and sleepless nights and all that kind of stuff. So that's a big one. One other wrinkle that comes into this business structure till it's too late kind of a mistake is overlooking securities laws, taking in partners, investors, venture capital, finance, whatever, before you're ready. The securities laws and the investor rules apply to everybody, small startups, big startups, and all of that involves regulatory issues that can get you in a heap of hot water with the government. So again, at least consulting a lawyer and getting a clear picture before you take the big steps and jump in with both feet, I think makes a lot of sense.
It's important to have a good business structure, and you can talk with a lawyer or an accountant
Mm-hmm.
about what kind of structure is going to be right for your business.
Right.
So,
And don't
and
make assumptions that you know.
exactly, and make sure that people are going to follow the money. So your
Mm-hmm.
business account needs to be in a whole separate institution from your personal account.
That's the idea of the business entity. The LLC or the corporation has its own tax identification, it has its own financial accounts, business accounts, and it has its own legal personhood in the eyes of the law. So if somebody needs to sue because of something the company did, they sue the company. Now, sometimes they also sue the individuals, and there's a bunch of legal wrangling that happens there, but that company is the sort of first line of defense, the moat around the castle, in a sense.
Okay.
And
So what's
yeah,
another mistake that'll cost a startup a lot of money?
Well, you said it in the beginning, overlooking or ignoring or delaying your intellectual property protection and considerations. A lot of folks think, well, because I paid for it, I own it. And that is just not the way copyright and trademarks and patents and things work. If you don't have that work made for hire contract, um, or or an employment relationship, the worker, the contractor, owns the copyrights and the patents, and sometimes even the trade secret stuff that they develop for the company. So the rule of thumb I like to follow is every single person who comes in contact with any business project must sign a written contract, and it should have that work made for hire language in it or similar. Another wrinkle in this intellectual property arena is delaying getting your trademark, your brand protection in place. This can be very, very expensive and potentially devastating to a business if they don't take care of it as soon as it's sort of practical to do that. I have a client that had started up a brand. It was a podcast brand, and they had been going for about 13 or 14 years and never registered the title of the show as a trademark, right? And came to me and said, "Let's do it. It's time." And when we went to do it, we found out that there was another entity using a very, very similar name. Well, what happened was that other entity had filed their trademark registration on an intent to use basis. They hadn't even started their show, but they said, we're going to. That registration went through and put the brakes on our registration, put us on hold while we waited to see if they ever did actually launch their show. It ended up being about 4 years of my client sort of being in this limbo, not knowing whether he could protect his brand, keep using it even. And of course, he's paying me every few months to follow up and process and try to negotiate with them and all of that. So it ended up costing him, tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees and who knows how much in lost opportunity, just because he was sort of crouching in the shadows at times.
Right.
So
So, in
yeah,
a
it can be.
basic employment agreement is a contract that every startup needs to have, a structure
Well,
for their
employment
business.
agreements, yeah, employment agreements, but also the intellectual property. I'm sorry, the independent contractor
Right,
agreements as well should be
right.
in writing. The other side of the intellectual property coin, of course, is not understanding the intellectual property rules and winding up on the wrong side of an infringement claim.
Because things
The
are
way,
born copywritten nowadays, anyway.
yeah,
Okay.
um,
And what happens if someone decides to use an online template rather than an actual lawyer or paralegal?
well, as someone who actually markets and sells online templates under the easylegaltemplates.com brand, it's hard for me to say don't ever do it. But if you're going to, make sure that they're coming from a reputable source and make sure that it's the right form for what you're doing. That client that I told you about that used the AI document to generate a collaboration agreement, the big mistake was asking the AI for a collaboration agreement rather than for an agreement that does XYZ and letting it decide whether it's a collaboration or letting a lawyer help them
Yeah.
decide that kind of stuff. So
AI
it's
has
about
not been to graduate school yet.
well, it's read an awful lot. I mean, which is a whole other intellectual property concern and issue. Make sure you're using the right forms and templates for your particular use case. And if you don't know for sure, ask the question and maybe get the form and read it and make sure and ask for a refund if it's not the right thing.
All right.
So,
So that's
um,
great. This is really important information. There are way more things that'll cost you a lot of money if you don't hire a lawyer. So
mhm,
it's really an investment in your safety. I often say that startups need three people on their team: the marketing person, the
mhm.
accountant, and the lawyer. And the reason is that the marketing person helps you make money, the accountant helps you keep most of it, and the lawyer stops you from losing it.
That's a great way of putting it. I think that's right. Yeah.
So
And
thank you very much, Gordon Firemark. We're going to put contact information and links in the comments for people to get a hold of you. And
yeah,
I'm Mary Scott with Business Riff. I want startups to be wildly successful, and one of the best things you can do to accomplish that is book a call with me at businessriff.com. And join us again next time for Stuck, Time to Improv.